is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call Keir. Put your questions to the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, now. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC.
Morning, 4 minutes after 9 on Monday, the 14th of September. We know we are back in business because delighted to welcome back to the studio Sir Keir Starmer in the Call Keir segment after our respective summer holidays. I understand you got away, so I hope you had a good time. I managed to as well. And you're suitably refreshed as we go into an exciting political period, not least as regards the extraordinary developments for Brexit. You and your colleagues will be debating this in the House later this afternoon. Sir Keir, who's right on this, Boris Johnson or Tony Blair?
Well, Boris Johnson's all over the place. Here he is. He signed a deal. He either knew what he was signing, in which case, how's he got himself into this position? Or he didn't know, and I think that's probably even worse. But I think, do you know what? I mean, it's interesting you say we're just back. I think the vast majority of the population would say, what on earth is going on? You're reopening things that we thought were closed. You said you'd get a deal. Get on and get a deal. I don't think that the outstanding issues can't be resolved. So my message to Boris Johnson is get on with it and actually focus on what most people are talking about this morning, which is how on earth do we defeat and deal with this pandemic? That's what's on people's minds. They thought this was over. He's reopening it. I think the nation would say to Boris Johnson, get on with it. Stop this. You're wrong.
But the Labour Party is in part supporting where he is at the moment, are you not?
Well, we are supporting the Prime Minister getting a deal. A deal is in the national interest.
What about breaking the law? What about reneging on a treaty, Sir Keir?
No, he's making a mistake reneging on a treaty. That will have reputational damage for the UK. I mean, here we are on the world stage, you know, for the first time in many years on our own. And what's the first thing we do? We break a treaty. But it's basic stuff. If you say to other nations, we agree something, and then a few months later you say, no, we don't, the chances are they're not going to trust you going forward.
So as regards the internal market bill, what would he need to do to gain your support on that? What are you looking for?
I do think we need legislation on an internal market, and we would support that if the government took away these problems, didn't breach international law and act in this way. I agree that legislation is needed. So, I mean, I'd say to the Prime Minister, look, go away, go back to the drawing board, drop these problems, don't act in this reckless and wrong way, and we'll look again at the legislation.
Has he got time for that, Sir Keir?
Well, you know, there's a bit of time. He's bouncing this bill through, but it would be far better to recognise he's wrong, go back, bring forward something that will work, and in the meantime, get on with the deal. We need a deal. That's in the national interest. So my message to Boris Johnson is get on with it. You promised there was an oven-ready deal. Get on with it. Deliver this, and let us focus on what really matters to people, which is defeating this pandemic.
Susie, coming to you after this last question from me on this subject. Sir Keir, is there any set of circumstances in which you could consider that you might support Boris Johnson breaking the law? I refer to, what if this so-called third country status was not afforded to the United Kingdom? Therefore, I read that it could influence getting food from from Great Britain to Northern Ireland.
Look, I mean, the problem...
Would you break the law then?
The problem is that isn't the case, and because Brexit's become so tiresome and there's been so much misinformation that we're almost, you know, numb by it. That's not true. That isn't going to happen.
I thought third country status was absolutely crucial.
No, the way the government was spinning it yesterday was not the accurate situation. But let's say we've got into this situation where
what is the accurate? Just so my listeners know,
misinformation. We will be a third party status, of course, when we're outside the EU. But as to what the checks and balances are across the United Kingdom, that can be resolved with the EU and resolved within the United Kingdom. And we will support legislation that sensibly does that. I mean, Boris Johnson, amongst other things, should be getting the four nations together. England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland are heading off in all sorts of different directions now on this and on COVID. What the Prime Minister is failing to do is hold the union together. You know, I think look across the union and we're seeing all countries going in different directions. For heaven's sake, pull it together, lead from the front, lead for the United Kingdom, get a deal, focus on the pandemic.
Let's get to those callers. I think this is the subject that Susie in Ruislip wants to raise with you, Sir Keir. Susie, you're on the radio. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Sir Keir.
Hi, Susie.
hi. I've been most impressed with how you've held the Prime Minister's feet to the fire at PMQs over the government's poor handling of COVID-19 and the related issues. I'd now like to ask you if and when you're planning to do the same over Johnson's attempt to break international law in respect of the mutually signed EU withdrawal agreement. Could you also give me your view on why the government has chosen this particular moment to do this? Thank you.
Yes, Susie, look, thank you very much for that. We were just...
That's a nice opener for you.
It's a nice opener.
Yeah.
And
knock that for 4 through covers.
The answer is the Labour Party that I support will not go along with breaking international law. It's breaking our word on the international stage, and we shouldn't be doing it. So the Labour Party...
No terms whatsoever.
The Labour Party will not go along with breaking international law. And you can see, actually, Susie, that quite a lot of Conservatives are in exactly the same place. They are very uncomfortable with what their own Prime Minister is doing. And when you get the Labour Party and lots of Conservative MPs saying the same thing, then it usually points to the Prime Minister being wrong about it. Your second question, Susie, is a really good one, which is why he's doing it. There's a bit of me suspects that he's trying to do this for leverage in the talks, and that just as we saw last year, at the 11th hour, there will be some concession, some movement, and we'll get a deal. And in a sense, I do very much hope that we get a deal, because we do need a deal for our country. Susie, what do you think when you see what he's doing? I mean, you look on it. What's your sense of what he's up to?
Yes, well, I think this is all part of the tactics, to be quite frank. And I also think he made a mistake when he actually signed the deal way back in, last year, and then they ratified it in January. I just don't think that there was any time to go through it. He's not a man who looks at detail, and I don't think he looked at the detail of it. And this has come back to bite him. That's my personal view about the matter.
Yeah, Susie, I mean, that's the bit we were discussing, which is, did he know what he was doing? In which case, what on earth was he doing? Or didn't he bother reading it?
Susie, thank you for that. I know another area. Thank you, Susie. Have a good day. I'm sure you'll be watching Sir Keir put him through his paces later today, and you can hear it here on LBC. You talked about the situation as regards if I may say, disunited kingdom as regards the pandemic. I think Jay in Birmingham wants to talk about local lockdowns. Jay, you're through to Sir Keir Starmer. Go ahead, Jay. Good morning.
Yeah,
hi, Jay.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Sir Keir. Yeah, just a quick question. Basically, all these local lockdowns are in Labour areas where there's a high density of ethnic minorities. Now, why don't you actually say that it's basically the ethnic minorities that are basically more susceptible to COVID?
What makes you think that? Jay, can I ask before Sir Keir comments? Certainly you're right. You look at areas such as Birmingham, Leicester. I hear what you're saying. I'm not disputing that. But just to explore what you're saying, that the BAM people don't respect it? Or what are you trying to say, Jay, just so I can nail that?
Well, basically, not only do they don't respect it, but also, why is the Labour Party too afraid to say that these are the areas...
OK, Jay, I'd just put a caveat. Of course, it's BAME people who suffer disproportionately both illness and fatality. So I think we need to get that out there. But your question is to the leader of the Labour Party, not me. Sir Keir.
Jay, because I don't think it's right. If you look at Manchester, the Mayor of Manchester was making it clear that across various bits of Manchester, he was very worried. He's been saying this for a number of weeks now, and it's across completely different areas. It's one of the main points he was making. And all the evidence so far, Jay, is that the group, if you like, that are most likely at the moment to have COVID-19 are younger people, broadly people in their 20s, and a lot of talk about that. But at the moment, what I'm most anxious about is that the government gets a grip of this, because I think people are now really worried. They're looking at the numbers, 3,000 or so a day. This is becoming a rising figure, and there's some news at the weekend that it's going into care homes. So I think most people would say get a grip on it. Jay, what we've done as the Labour Party, just so you know, is where the government has introduced restrictions, whether it's general restrictions or in a particular area, we have supported them in that. I don't think it's helpful to the public to have the government and the opposition saying different things about restrictions. We've supported them in that. but we don't think they've got the comms right. The messaging's been pretty hopeless, and the testing is absolutely all over the place. I don't know what it's like for you, Joe, but certainly in London last week, people were being told to go hundreds of miles to get a test, which is pretty ridiculous.
Let's talk a little bit about this, because, Jay, thank you for your call. I know there is a concern, Sir Keir, that we have a disunited kingdom here, and you only have to look at today, the rule of six. Again, the Labour Party, obviously, is going to, because you want to keep it, but privately, do you think the rule of six is a good policy?
I do support the rule of six. And
Privately?
I do. I think that you need something simple, easily understood. And I think that the government was slow back in February, March to appreciate the problem it was about to face. And we can't repeat that error again. So I do support the rule of six. We've publicly come out in support of it. And I will say, as I said to the Prime Minister I would, as the leader of the opposition, I say to everybody, please follow the government advice, please follow these rules. And I know people will have different views about them.
But why six? Well, I know you not, but you say you support. Why not 5? Why not 8? Why 6?
You can make the argument, why not 5 or 6 or 7? You have to go for a number backed by the scientists. They say 6, and I think we should abide by that rule. I mean, because we had a bit of relaxation of the restrictions over the summer, we got a bit more used to what it's like, but just cast your mind back to what it was like in those days when the death toll was going up and up every day. Awful stories from care homes and from hospitals. We do not want to go back there. We'll support the government on this. But what I would say to the government is, as it were, if you're asking that of the British people, your side of the bargain is to get the testing and tracing and isolating right. In order to keep this under control.
Now, were he here, he would hit you now with a blizzard of numbers that they're going at 350,000 and they'll be at 2 million by December, 10 million by January, and this is world-beating, is what Mr Johnson
would say. It's what he always does. Instead of attending to the problem in hand, he makes another promise about the future. So instead of saying, I'm going to fix the system as it now is, he says we're going to have 10 million tests by the end of the year or early next year. I just want the problem we've got fixed. Across the country last week, there were plenty of examples of people being told. We had one person in London being told to go to Telford or Inverness with her 4-year-old child for a test. It's ridiculous. And so instead of promising something that is probably never going to be achieved in however many months' time, get on with the job in hand and fix the problem here. There's a problem. Let's all know what the problem is, and we can all play our part in trying to fix it. I think that's actually the best way forward. And one of my frustrations with the Prime Minister is if he actually stood up and said, look, something has gone wrong, I accept that, this is what's gone wrong and this is how we're going to fix it. I think most people would say, good. But instead of that, he says, no, it's all brilliant, it's stunning, and it's going to be even more stunning in a few months' time.
Let's go to other calls. Alex in Liverpool, you're through to Sir Keir. Go ahead, Alex. Good morning.
Hi, Alex.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. Mr Starmer, you've criticised the tactics of Extinction Rebellion for blocking the newspapers. I mean, why? We need. They're doing a lot more to protect the environment and oppose the disastrous policies that various governments have implemented than you are, frankly, at the moment. And I mean, I just feel that we're lacking an opposition with any strength to take a stand and do what is needed to protect the future.
Alex, stay on the line. Let's put some of this. There has been criticism of you, Sir Keir, that you were too slow off the mark to criticise the blockade taxes in Broxbourne. How would you respond? Do you think you were a bit late?
No, it's rubbish. Labour Party put out a line on the Saturday
Why not you?
Morning. Because the Labour Party put out the line, that's what we do. But I, in fact, put out a line myself anyway. So there's no difference between me and the Labour Party. It's ridiculous to suggest the Labour Party line isn't my line. I obviously agreed that line. So that's slightly ridiculous. But Alex, can I just take you on? Because obviously climate change is a huge issue, and it is right to draw attention to it. And I think that over the last 10 years or so, we haven't had enough attention on climate change, and there needs to be more. But the tactics and the action of Extinction Rebellion, particularly blockading newspapers, was just wrong, in my view, and counterproductive. People should be, a free press is the cornerstone of our democracy, and people should be able to read the newspaper that they want to read. And I actually think it was counterproductive. I think it put more people off than brought people on. And the test of this is it actually persuading people that this cause is the right cause and make them more likely to, take action themselves in the way that they go about their everyday lives. And I actually think that this action was counterproductive. I suspect there's more people now who are less sympathetic than there were before.
Alex, a quick response to what you've heard from Sir Keir?
Yeah, I think that, yes, we're taking some kind of a stand and doing things which are inconvenient, then protest is ignored, and it will continue to be ignored. Opposition has to have some teeth.
Oh, Alex, I've got nothing against protest. There's plenty of lawful protest. We've seen huge marches and protests across the country on a number of occasions. Look at what happened with the Iraq War. Huge. I think 1 million people out on the streets that day. So you can make a very strong point through a protest. The separate question is whether through this action you achieve what you want to achieve, and I actually think it was counterproductive.
Let me ask you this, Sir Keir. A couple of your colleagues, Dawn Butler, said that it was excellent work. Diane Abbott seemed to be of a similar opinion and said it was a legal tactic. Have you had conversations with both or either?
I haven't directly spoken to either of them about it. I just disagree with them. Obviously, people will have different opinions, but my strong opinion is this was counterproductive. It was wrong, and we should focus. We shouldn't miss the bigger picture here, which is climate change is a very, very important issue, and we do need to shine a light on that. But this is the wrong way to do it.
And Boris Johnson, when he said you didn't condemn it because you were frightened about some Labour crusties, I think he said.
Listen, what the Prime Minister done. For all listeners, just watch out for this week. At Prime Minister's Questions, we have 6 questions. And on the 6th question, Boris Johnson descends into insulting me. The reason he does it on the 6th question is because it's the only question I can't get back up again and answer him. So watch out for that this week.
Let me pass you my private number. You're always welcome to come in on a Thursday morning. You can have it every week.
Yes, I suppose I could do the 7th on here.
Come on air.
Do that.
We've got a deal. You heard it here first. Let's go to Charlotte in Colindale. Charlotte, now, your question is about cladding. Charlotte, before I give you a question, if you're not fully aware of cladding, this is goes back to... hopefully you are aware of it, but if not...
Yes, that's what... Yeah.
There's 3 million people in homes, some residential, some local authority owned, and there's still cladding and they're effectively blighted. That's a sentence of background. Charlotte, you're through. Go ahead.
Hello there. Good morning, Sir Keir.
Hi, Charlotte.
Hi there. I live in an area in North London of intense new building and regeneration. Just this week, I found out that our development is clad in highly combustible ACM cladding with non-existent fire protection. My home is currently unsafe and unmortgageable. Millions of leaseholders nationwide are in similar positions. What will you be doing to hold this government to account on this scandalous failure of fire safety standards and to ensure cost of remedial work do not fall on the shoulders of leaseholders and tenants?
Charlotte, can I just first sympathise with you? I've been picking up these stories of people who can't sell their homes or can't remortgage in some case, and of course the anxiety of living in somewhere that's got the cladding on. I just think this is totally unacceptable. It's now over 3 years since Grenfell. That was a terrible, terrible night, when people lost their lives, and I cannot believe that anybody thinks it's acceptable that 3+ years after the event, this cladding is even up there. Of course, there's the problem with selling, which is terrible, remortgaging, but people are living in the buildings with this cladding on. And I do know it's complicated. Some of this is public, some of it is private landlords, etc., etc. Yes. But 3 years on, a government with an 80-seat majority do something about it. This cladding has got to come down. It's completely unacceptable. It's up there. And the government needs to do something about it, and we'll hold them to account on that, Charlotte. I'm really sorry you're in that position.
What's interesting is... sorry, Charlotte, a response from you. I'll go... I do apologise. Charlotte, go ahead.
That's okay. Our Tory MP recently voted against implementation of the Grenfell recommendations, and we're getting very little support from him. So it's a case really of just trying to lobby as many members of government as we can, and councillors and MPs.
Well, we're doing a lot here on LBC. I mean, Sir Keir, you may be aware, last week the government talked about an £11 billion house building initiative. The costs roughly of sorting out the cladding are around £15 billion, and it struck a lot of my listeners as strange that they're ready to try and support the building of new properties where you have up to 3 million people, some of whom are living in potential fire traps, others in houses that they've bought with life savings and they're worthless. It seems a strange way to spend your money.
It's completely unacceptable. It's completely unacceptable, and this shouldn't be party political. I think anybody who saw Grenfell and that dreadful, dreadful night must come together now and say to the government that is just unacceptable. Do something about it. The safety of where people live is paramount, and heaven forbid that we have another night like that. So everybody should call on the government, whatever your political party, whoever you vote for, call on the government, do something about this. We owe it to the people who are in this situation.
Thanks, Charlotte. Good luck. Stay tuned to LBC. We're not going to let that one go. Katie in Dartford, you're through to Sir Keir Starmer. Go ahead, Katie.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Sir Keir.
Hi,
how
Katie.
does Labour propose that we repay the national debt, and can you guarantee that the easy option of increasing corporation tax wouldn't be taken by Labour when so many self-employed limited companies such as myself received absolutely no government help whatsoever?
Yeah, Katie, thank you for raising that. We're not calling for raises in tax, and particularly at the moment when we absolutely need to reopen our economy and get it back up and running. I think increasing tax would be the wrong thing to do. Obviously, as we go into the next general election in 2024, we, the Labour Party, are going to have to look at what is the size of the national debt at this stage, what do we want to spend money on, and what's the proper tax regime for that. But we're not calling for tax rises at the moment. I think most companies would say, most individuals, particularly self-employed, Katie, you mentioned that, would say make it as easy as possible for us to get back to business, because we're at that critical stage now this autumn where the furlough scheme is being withdrawn, support is coming away, and lots of businesses are on the edge. It's one of the reasons we've said to the government, don't end furlough and the support at the same time for all businesses and all sectors.
How would you select? Because we've spoken about this, but if you look at something such as the theatre industry, they are, sadly, virtually no theatres are open again. Does furlough extend for them, Sir Keir? How would that work?
I think most of the sectors are relatively straightforward. Retail is a problem, theatres, arts and culture is a problem, aviation and travel. We know the areas that are most affected, and what we've been saying is keep support in for those areas for a bit longer so that they can turn the corner. I mean, tourism's another one. The tourism industry is closing down in September, October, and will reopen, we hope, in March next year. They just need a bridge to get to next March. So don't end it all in one go, because these are good businesses. These are businesses that are thriving, but they just can't thrive under the current rules. And I don't think it's fair to those businesses to say, you're not the sort of business that we're going to need in 5 or 10 years' time, because we want tourism in this country. We're not seriously saying, are we, that that's going to go and we don't want it back, or aviation and building of aeroplanes. I was up in North Wales 3 or 4 weeks ago with Airbus. We've got, incredible workforces up there building aeroplane wings. We don't want to lose that. So I think the support needs to be, we're not saying all furlough should stay forevermore, not at all, but focused, targeted on the areas that most needed, I think, to see them through.
Katie, thank you for that. We saw the beginning of the month, the real steal. You talk about Prime Minister's question when Boris Johnson said you'd remain silent about Jeremy Corbyn's failure to condemn the IRA. Why did that hit such a sore point with you, Sir Keir?
It hit a sore point because it was so obviously wrong, and I have prosecuted terrorists as the Director of Public Prosecutions for 5 years. Before I was Director of Public Prosecutions, I worked in Northern Ireland with the Police Service of Northern Ireland.
His point not how you referred to Jeremy Corbyn, not you personally. His point was staying silent about Mr Corbyn's failure to condemn the IRA, not yours. Isn't that the point Boris Johnson was driving at?
I have never stayed silent about calling out terrorism and calling out the IRA. And
you made that claim to Jeremy Corbyn when he was part of the...
When I've been absolutely clear on this. I've spent years of my life working with police officers prosecuting very serious terrorist cases.
And you told Mr Corbyn that when you worked with him?
He knows this, and I've never wavered from this position. I worked with the police service in Northern Ireland for 5 years, and I was working therefore with communities that suffered great loss because of the terrorist acts that took place in Northern Ireland. I know people who've got family members who've been affected by this, and so I just thought that it was the usual general insult from the Prime Minister without thinking through what he was saying.
Have you publicly spoken out? When Mr Corbyn was the leader of the party, you were working with him, did you publicly make a statement about Mr Corbyn's view towards the IRA?
But on any issue of terrorism that has arisen whilst Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party, I've spoken out. I spoke out, slightly different context in Salisbury when we had the poisonings there. Very, very clear about that. Whatever anybody else said, I knew very clearly in my own mind what I needed to say and what I wanted to say and what was the right thing to say about Salisbury. The other thing the Prime Minister accused me of, I think it was a few weeks before, was saying nothing about Salisbury. He was just completely wrong, and he had to be shown the clip of me actually saying it. But even then, of course, he hasn't come back and apologised. He just slings... my assessment is that he started PMQs back in the early days when it was me and him trying to answer questions. That went hopelessly wrong. Then decided to stop answering questions, and now he's so desperate he's just reaching for insults. I think usually by the sixth question, I think sometimes it comes a bit earlier now.
Let's go to another question for the LBC audience. Kate in Barnes, you're through to Sir Keir Starmer. Go ahead, Kate.
Hi, Nick, and thank you very much for having me on. Hello, Sir Keir.
Hi, Kate.
I'm calling about Hammersmith Bridge. I know that you had Greg Hands on earlier, Nick, who really summarised the situation very well.
Yep.
Lots of people in our community, Sir Keir, are reappraising Labour now that you're in charge. But we've seen the utter incompetence and indifference of Labour-led Hammersmith and Fulham Council and TfL, led, of course, by Mayor Sadiq Khan, when it comes to Hammersmith Bridge. So I want to know how you can show us that, to use your phrase, you will get on with it. And how do we know that you'd make an effective leader whose promises aren't just sound bites? And just to end, what our West London community badly needs is a temporary bridge, let alone a permanent bridge. Of course we need a permanent bridge, but we need a temporary bridge in days or weeks. It's urgent now. We can't wait any longer.
Kate, you must be really frustrated because I think the bridge was closed for a very long time.
Last year.
Last year.
You can't even push your bicycle over.
Yeah, you can't even walk over the bridge. No. Kate, I have to confess, I'm not completely over the detail of exactly why it is that we're in this position at the moment, but your challenge to me is what am I going to do about it? So as a result of you calling up and asking me about this, I will make sure I'm across it and I will talk to the relevant people and see whether we can't move this on, because it must be totally frustrating. I looked a bit at it over the weekend and I think there are some structural issues to do with the weather, but I'm not sure, Kate, and the answer to your question is I'm the sort of leader that wants to get on and fix things, and so as a result of you calling, I'm going to make some calls later on today and see what I can do.
Okay, you can speak to the perhaps local Labour leader council. We can pick that up on the next time you come and see. We look forward to that.
Yeah.
One of your front bench colleagues, Ed Miliband, has been out and about today saying that when it comes to anti-Semitism, the party is getting back on track. His words, not mine. And yet you will be aware, in May of last year, the Labour Party was given a recording of Pete Wilsman saying that Israeli embassy was behind claims of anti-Semitism. Mr. Wilsman is still in the party 16 months on. Why?
Well, I don't want to comment on the individual case, but I'm not going to dodge the challenge, because one of my central concerns has been how we deal with anti-Semitism. And the first thing I said as leader of the Labour Party in my acceptance speech was that I would root out anti-Semitism in our party.
Mr. Benland agrees. You're getting it back on track, says Mr.
Well, I'll be judged by... I spoke to Jewish communities within hours of becoming Labour leader, and I've been working with them, and they've said to me, and I accept from them, that I'm going to be judged by my actions, not by my words. On the cases and the particular challenge, Nick, of the speed, etc., I now get regular reports on my desk telling me about why cases aren't going as quickly as they should. So I've got a line of sight on it. We've got new processes in place. We've got a new approach. We are acting much, much more quickly.
16 months, Sir Keir.
Yes. I know that, and we're working on that, but I'm determined that we will deal with it. I don't want to go into the individual case, but the challenge...
One wouldn't run a business like this.
No, it's taking too long. And I want it to be speeded up. We are making changes, but I think, in fairness, anybody looking at this would say we are taking this seriously. We are taking action, and we will be judged by the action we're taking. And I'm pleased to be judged in that way. One
final question, if I can hold on to you for another minute. Sky News released a special programme called The Union. In trouble? With a question mark. Your colleague, Welsh First Minister, or your Labour colleague, Mark Drakeford, was asked about his views on the possible breakup of the United Kingdom. He said this:
I am very clear that if a population in Scotland, or indeed in Wales, wanted to hold a referendum, it is for the people of Wales and the people of Scotland to make that decision. And then that decision must be respected.
First Minister Mark Drakeford. Sir Keir, is the union safe in Labour's hands?
Yes, I strongly support the United Kingdom. I think it's in all of our interest to hold together as the United Kingdom. I think dealing with the pandemic has shown that. But we need to make the case for the United Kingdom. Mark Drakeford was making a point about who decides in certain circumstances, but no one in the Labour Party wants the United Kingdom broken up.
Would you stand in the way of a Scottish Indy Ref 2 or Welsh referendum?
Well, we will go into the elections in Scotland, making the argument for the union and making the argument that we don't need a referendum. Obviously, that election is in May of next year, and we'll make the best case we can between now and then.
OK, good seeing you. Look forward to seeing you again in a month's time. Without being rude, a little bit of homework to do that we can perhaps share.
Yes, we've got a few things to come back to.
You have. And you've got a busy way in the Commons this afternoon. Sir Keir Starmer here, appearing on LBC, where the 9:30 news is next with Simon Conway.
Sir Keir Starmer has told LBC the Prime Minister is making a mistake by reneging on the EU withdrawal agreements. The government says it's introducing legislation as an insurance policy to protect the integrity of the UK if a free trade deal with Brussels isn't secured. But ministers admit it would break international law. Speaking on Call Keir, the Labour leader said his party would support an internal market bill, but not as it stands.
I mean, I'd say to the Prime Minister, look, go away, go back to the drawing board, drop these problems, don't act in this